I think portal hypertension is common for the surgeons and the pediatricians, and there's always a confusion who should manage these patients. Portal hypertension, basically it's because of increased blood flow. Its pressure is equal to resistance into flow. So in liver disease, your resistance is going to go up and flow is going to increase because of the collaterals. So it's because of the resistance and the increased flow. Baseline portal pressure is around 7 to 10 millimeter. When do you call it as portal hypertension? When your baseline pressure is more than 10 millimeter, or you do a hepatic venous pressure gradient. Nobody does this because it's more of academic rather than doing it practically, where you look at the free pressure in the vein, hepatic vein, and then you look at the wedge pressure. But we don't do this, so we only look at portal pressures. Now nobody also measures the portal pressure. So how do we make a diagnosis of portal hypertension? It's basically on Doppler, splenomegaly, thrombocytopenia. That's how we make a diagnosis. What was important, why it was important to know the pressures is because if you have a pressure more than 10 millimeter, there are chances that there will be esophageal varices. And if you have a pressure more than 20 millimeter, then there is chances that it will bleed. So that was the reason why you need to measure the portal pressures. This diagram I've taken from Wiley, and I wanted to show you this because it's extremely good diagram. If you can see the splenic vein, and this is the superior mesenteric vein, they join together to form the portal vein. And then you have this vein, which is a left gastric vein that goes into the azygos to the superior vena cava. So your portal cavernoma is going to develop here. Back pressure changes are going to cause collaterals to form here, splenic vein to enlarge, short gastric veins to enlarge. So you are going to get these varices that are going to come up. What we are worried about are these varices that come up, the esophageal and the gastric. We are not really worried about the umbilical varices that will form or the rectal varices that will form, because the chance of bleeding is maximum from the esophageal varices or from the gastric varices. In liver disease, why does portal hypertension occur? One is because the liver is gradually getting stiff, so there is going to be resistance that develops. Because of that, there is hyperdynamic circulation. There is a underfill theory that comes up, systemic vasodilatation that takes place, sodium and water retention, and the collaterals start forming. Among the causes of portal hypertension, you have these prehepatic, intrahepatic, and posthepatic causes. Prehepatic causes, I've highlighted the point, which is the most common is portal vein thrombosis, your portal cavernoma. Posthepatic, commonest is Budd-Chiari. Intrahepatic, liver disease, Hep B, Hep C, autoimmune Wilson's, biliary atresia. Okay, these are the common things that cause portal hypertension in children. There is a whole list more, but these are the ones that we see routinely. How do these patients present to us? They either come to us with a GI bleed, hematemesis, melena. They come to us with isolated splenomegaly, and you've done a Doppler and you picked up portal hypertension. And the most important thing is the bleeding varices. The varices 2 to 3 centimeters above the gastroesophageal junction, that's where they're going to bleed. Mortality wise, if they bleed, first episode has a chance of 30 to 50% mortality depending on how close they are to the center where they can be treated. And 90% of cirrhosis are going to land up with varices. When we do scopy, we grade the varices. Why is it important to grade the varices? Because it tells us which one we need to treat and which one we don't need to treat, which is likely to bleed. Grade 3 and above are likely to bleed. Grade 1, not likely to bleed, so we don't really treat it. Grade 1 flattens with when you put in air, when you're doing endoscopy. Grade 2 does not get flattened when you put in air, and it is separated by healthy mucosa in between. And grade 3, the varices are not separated from each other and they are not flattened. So this is how you'll see grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. You can see this grade 1. I see it much clearer on the computer than here. This is grade 1, you hardly see any varices, 1 or 2 here, this one over here. Grade 2, you can see these larger varices, but they are separated from each other. They are not compressible by air. In grade 3, you can see they are completely with each other. Now there are some gastric varices also that will take place, and there is a classification for the gastric varices. So you have gastroesophageal varix 1, which is the same esophageal varix which is going down towards the minor curvature. Then you have gastroesophageal varix 2, type 2, which is going towards the cardia and the fundus. IGV1, isolated gastric varix, which is occurring in the fundus in absence of esophageal varices. and IgV2 are varices which occur in the gastric body, antrum and the pylorus. What is more important is your varices in the fundic varices, that's your GOV2 and your IgV1. They are the ones who are likely to bleed. So if you have fundic varices, you are a little worried. The advantage of GOV2 is if you treat the esophageal varix, usually the gastric varix will also settle down. But if you have an isolated IgV1, then you need to treat that. So you need to do your endotherapy for that. So that's the image. I think if you see the image, you will remember it very clearly. GOV1 is towards the minor curvature, GOV2 is going towards the fundus. Isolated IgV1 is in the fundus and IgV2 is towards the antrum and the pylorus. So why is the grading important? Because grade 1 is not going to bleed. You don't need to do anything about these grade 1 varices, but grade 2 and grade 3 will bleed. And then there is something known as portal hypertensive gastropathy, which is more of dilatation of the mucosal and the submucosal vessels of the stomach. I'll show you a photograph of that later on. But this is another area where there are no varices, but just because of the hypertensive gastropathy, the child can bleed from the stomach. So when do these varices bleed? Mostly it's because of some infections that have occurred. The hyperdynamic circulation increases with the fever. Sometimes they have a respiratory tract infection, they are coughing, that increases the intra-abdominal pressure, they can bleed. So most of the times you get these patients bleeding when they have had some URTI or some fever. How do you treat a GI bleed? First is stabilization, your ABCs, you can give octreotide, terlipressin, and then you have to do endotherapy. Now, between the two endotherapy, what is available is sclerotherapy, that is your EST, endoscopic sclerotherapy, or EVL, that is your endoscopic variceal ligation. Ligation is preferred because the results are better, both in adults and children. The problem with sclerotherapy is a lot of issues. You can get aspiration pneumonia because you are injecting something, and if it leaks into the esophagus, it can get aspirated. Because you are injecting something into the esophagus all the time, you are at a risk of developing a stricture. You can cause dysmotility. There will be local ulcers that will form. Sometimes you can get mediastinitis, perforation, and the sclerosant that you are using can, from the vein, go straight into the pulmonary, cause pulmonary embolism and sepsis. So these are the problems with your sclerotherapy. The agents that we use for gastric varices is always glue that we use because gastric varices are connected to the pulmonary vessels more rapidly. The circulation is much faster, so you don't want to use a sclerosant there. And for esophageal varices, we use usually sodium tetradecyl sulfate here. We are not use ethanolamine. Now, what about these prophylaxis? Suppose you did a Doppler today, you found these cavernoma is there. How are you going to treat this portal hypertension? One is, don't allow the varices to form. There's portal hypertension, cavernoma there, but there are no varices. So don't allow the varices to form. That is known as pre-primary prophylaxis. You found the varices, but they are not bleeding. That is primary prophylaxis. And then the child has come to you with a bleed, and now you're treating. That is known as secondary prophylaxis. So how do you treat them? Pre-primary prophylaxis, there is no role. You can't give things to prevent a varice formation. Primary prophylaxis, when a varix has formed but it's not bled, you can decide between EVL, that's your ligation, or a beta blocker. Sclerotherapy, no role, okay, as primary prophylaxis. Either you do EVL or you do beta blocker. Secondary prophylaxis, when the child has bled, you need to give a combination of both beta blockers and EVL. How do we diagnose? We diagnose with Doppler. We look at the flow, how the flow is taking. Is it towards the liver? Is it away from the liver? We look at the splenomegaly. We look at the platelet count, the splenic size. So you have various indexes that we do. The FIB score, the APRI index, lot of indexes that are there. But endoscopy remains the gold. What you are worried about is the varix. So it's the gold standard. When we start treatment sessions, when we've decided to treat, the treatment session should occur every 2 to 4 weeks till there is eradication of the varices, and then you need to check after 6 months and then probably yearly. And when do you do surgical intervention, that is your shunt surgeries, is when there is no response to varices after endotherapy. So that means the child continues to bleed, there is refractory ascites or there is symptomatic hypersplenism, then you may want to think about removing the spleen. But it's only about symptomatic, just don't treat a pancytopenia. Shunt surgeries, I'm not going to go into the details, but you have selective shunts, that is your distal renal shunts. You have a physiological shunt, which is a mesenteric left portal vein bypass. So you're not actually bypassing the liver. And the TIPS, which is just for pre-transplant that you're planning to do. Okay, so we'll go on to the case. This was November 2016. This child came to us. He was diagnosed as Budd-Chiari. He underwent a right hepatic vein and a mid hepatic vein venoplasty. He was diagnosed to be protein C deficient. We started him on low molecular weight heparin. February 2017, we stopped the low molecular weight heparin and put him on EcoSprin. Very difficult to put children on warfarin, which we have found trouble, because ideally you should be putting them on anticoagulation and not anti-platelet agents. But warfarin, we find children are not compliant with the diet. You need to stop completely green leafy vegetables. And the INR needs really fluctuates. So even though you're monitoring INR, 1 week later it will be 3, second week it will be 1, again it will be 4. So we are not able to manage children on warfarin that well. March 2018, he had 2 episodes of melena. Because he was an EcoSprin, it was thought it was to be gastritis, so aspirin was stopped. Doppler did not show any portal hypertension at that time. June 2008, he had 2 episodes of hematemesis. So at that time, endoscopy was done, and that showed grade 2 to grade 3 varices. And there was an extension of the varix in the cardia, so there was a GOV1. Now this child, ideally we should be doing ligation. In children, the problem is, how do you put in a cap in a small child? When you do ligation, you are putting in the cap and you're going inside. Most of these children are less than 10 kilos. So it's very difficult to put in a cap and go inside. So for us, our criteria of doing ligation is only if we are able to put in a cap into the esophagus, we do ligation, otherwise we'll end up doing sclerotherapy. So this child, we had to do sclerotherapy because the endoscope with the cap would not go in. Again, August 2018, they are less, but they're still there. He had portal hypertensive gastropathy. You can see this. It's like a snakeskin appearance. And this is severe, this is in the body of the stomach, severe portal hypertensive gastropathy with red signs over it. By September, the 3rd session, he had residual grade 1 varices, and then he was asked to do a scopy, check scopy after 6 months. He didn't come. He came after a year. By now, again, you develop grade 2 to grade 3 esophageal varices, and there's extension into the fundus. This is an inverted view where you do a J maneuver and you find an varix over there. This is your GOV2. Again, endosclerotherapy was done, sclerotherapy. But this child, within a week, he bled again after the sclerotherapy. So we were contemplating how do we get him to do more endotherapy. We again tried with a cap. This time he was a little bigger, so the cap went in. So you can see this. This is with a cap that you go in, and we've done a ligation here. So this time we did a ligation. We did in July 2019 again a ligation. By August it was just grade 1 varices, and now we planned an excopy in February. And currently we've started the child on warfarin, hoping that his INR remains stable. So portal hypertension in children, etiology is mainly extrahepatic portal vein obstruction, biliary atresia, or chronic liver disease. Hypersplenism, please do not treat until unless the child is symptomatic. Shunt surgeries, when we are planning, there's always a risk of encephalopathy, ascites that will develop. And most of these children, especially Budd-Chiari or extrahepatic portal vein obstruction, have an underlying thrombotic tendency when we do a thrombotic workup. And if you're going to do shunt surgery in them, your shunts may also get blocked. So that is another issue that occurs with doing shunt surgery in them. When we're using beta blockers, you have to be careful. Suppose this child is on beta blocker and he bleeds, the heart rate is not going to increase because beta blockers will cause bradycardia. Heart rate will not increase, compensation will not take place, suddenly the child will collapse. So if you have a child who's come to you bleeding, please don't start a beta blocker. And when you have a child on follow-up with a beta blocker and he bleeds, you have to tell them that as soon as he bleeds, stop the beta blocker. Endotherapy, there is role in primary and secondary prophylaxis, but it also depends on what technique that you're going to use, whether you're going to do sclero, you're going to do band ligation, so that will depend on that. So thank you very much.